So, I often get asked, where are you from? My mum is Anglo-Irish, born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and went to posh boarding school in England, studied in Scotland, and then moved to Sri Lanka, where she lived and worked for 10 years. My dad is Gujarati Indian, born in Nairobi, Kenya, and raised from about the age of 7 in Lancashire, in the north of England. So when I answer with Bunno, Bun Vegas, I'm a Bunno girl, born and bred, people sometimes get a bit shocked. But my parents and my hometown end up being quite a common topic of conversation when I meet new people. What I don't usually share is how living in Bunbury, for me, makes me think of a really, really painful time in my life. Sometime around when I was 10, I woke up to the sound of my mum's voice, and I heard her say, "Oh yes, I think I've found a lump in my breast." And I thought, as you do when you're 10, ew, why are you talking about your boobs to someone on the phone? Turns out she was on the phone to the doctor, and turns out that lump was breast cancer. And daily life looked pretty different from then onwards. My sister and I would get home from school and we'd sit down to watch cartoons on ABC Kids. And one of us would be peddling this old school juicer to cold press homegrown blades of wheatgrass to make nutrient shots, while the other would be cracking bag after bag of apricot kernels to extract the nut. It's a bit ridiculous, but we were told it would help Mum. After she had her mastectomy, I remember she took me with her shopping for her prosthetic breast. We were in a lovely little boutique and we went into the change rooms together, and she was trying on different sizes, and I was sort of giving feedback like we were looking for a prom dress or something, like, "Oh, that one looks really good. Oh, I think it fits. Yes, Mum, that's the one. Yes." And then we left with it in our hands with a smile on our face and a bounce in our step and on her chest. And her cancer went into remission for about a year. But unfortunately, after about a year of thinking everything was okay, it came back in her brain. It was really aggressive, and she became really sick really quickly. I remember being the last kid picked up from school. You know when you're in primary school and kids are leaving in fleets at the parent pickup area, and then there's, a few kids left and you're thinking, please don't let me be last, please don't let me be last. And then the second last kid gets picked up, and then, it's really bad when the staff start to leave and they see you and you're just standing there by yourself trying to act cool, like, yeah, everything's fine at home. And then Mum and Dad would eventually get to the parent pickup area, and I'd get in the car and see the familiar bruises on Mum's hands from the needles where she'd get her chemo infusions. And then I'd remember, right, that's why they're late, because today was a Perth day. Because back then, Bunbury didn't have the medical equipment that Mum needed for her treatment, and the current freeway wasn't built, so they'd take the 2.5-hour trip to Perth and back for her to get her chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And eventually, the palliative care unit in Bunbury Regional Hospital became our second home. It was in the last few weeks of year 7, and I was doing a spelling test, and I looked up and saw Dad at the door of the classroom, and he took me from class and we got in the car, and that's the first time I heard the word palliative, and I learnt that palliative care is where people go to die more comfortably. And on the last day of year 7, a few weeks after my 12th birthday, my mum took her last breath at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I wanted to be in the room when the nurses and her sisters cleaned her body, and so I was. And I wasn't scared, and I wasn't crying. It was Mum, and I loved her, and I just wanted her to be okay. So I gently wiped her face with a warm flannel, and a week later I read her eulogy at her funeral, and I gracefully sprinkled rose petals as her body in its coffin was lowered into the ground. And I wasn't scared, and I didn't cry, because it was Mum, and I loved her, and I just wanted her to be okay. Losing my mum prematurely to this day is such a pain in the proverbial. I wish I could talk to her. I wish I could ask her questions, and holes in my clothes could be fixed, or that I could just hear her voice or feel her hug. I'm a grown adult who lives with the societal pressures to be functional, and yet I get the fear of a small child being abandoned whenever someone close to me goes away or gets sick or seems emotionally absent. I'm so sensitive to the feelings of people around me slowly slipping away to leave a huge void in my life. But I'm really, really glad that the child version of me wasn't scared and was brave and didn't cry during that time in Bunbury. There have been endless tears since. But that experience taught my child self things that some people never learn in their lifetime. And for that, I'm really grateful. Mum didn't take anything with her to the grave, and that showed me that service to others and the friendships that we build are far more valuable than material riches. And watching her in such a dire state, with her body ravaged with disease and the end of her life in sight, act with such grace and humility and joy and generosity, gifted me this lifelong lesson of really believing in the humanity in people. And that's a really beautiful way to live in this world, in a world that can be really scary and feel really painful. Thank you.